Chapter 21 Changchun Qi Circulation, True Method of Li Hua. For the next month, He Pingxing spent his time in this monotonous life. Aside from eating and sleeping, all I do every day is cultivate myself. Try your best to guide the spiritual energy from outside the body into your body. However, even after a month, He Pingxing was unable to get the spiritual energy to circulate through his meridians for a full cycle. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared blankly at the moonlight outside the window. Is it really that difficult to cultivate the 5 elements' spiritual roots? Senior brother Hao Yun once said that he was able to draw qi into his body and circulate it for 1 cycle in half a month, thus breaking through to the first level of the qi refining stage. And those genius disciples can do it in just 2 or 3 days. But it's been a month already. Could it be that the cultivation technique is incorrect? Snap! He Pingxing slammed the basic breathing technique onto the table. Then, he reached under the bed and pulled out the dark, heavy earthenware jar. Over the past month, He Pingxing has naturally not given up exploring, using pottery jars to condense items every day. Adding 10 pounds of rice will turn it into 20 pounds, and the quality will be even higher. However, the rice did not turn into spirit rice as He Pingxing had imagined. After a month of testing, He Pingxing had gained a basic understanding of the properties of this treasure basin. First of all, it can only make things more numerous and stronger. But the species cannot be changed. For example, rice and spirit rice are 2 species, 2 completely different things. Therefore, rice cannot be transformed into spirit rice. Similarly, the axe only became much sharper. It did not become a magical weapon in the hands of an immortal due to the enhancement from the treasure basin. So here's the question. What should we strengthen today? He Pingxing looked around the room. Over the past month, he has upgraded almost everything in his household that could be upgraded. He even reinforced his shoes with shovels, spoons, bowls, and other utensils. The moonlight was like water. He Pingxing's gaze, however, fell on the book Basic Breathing Techniques on the table. A bold idea suddenly popped into his mind. Could cultivation techniques be strengthened? Give it a try. Anyway, I've already memorized the first 3 levels, so it doesn't matter if I over-enhance this thing and ruin it. Snap! Without hesitation, He Pingxing threw the book into the ceramic basin, making a crisp sound. However, he didn't have high expectations for the abstract idea that the treasure bowl could enhance the content of the book, so he threw the pottery bowl under the bed and soon fell asleep. I woke up early the next morning. He Pingxing rubbed his eyes, then half asleep, he reached out and habitually pulled out the wooden basin from under the bed. At first glance, hey, 2 books. It's really been enhanced. He Pingxing's heart was in his throat, and he excitedly reached into the treasure bowl and took out a book. Hiss hiss hiss. This texture. The previous one was handwritten by Hao Yun. The texture is surprisingly good, even though it's just an ordinary scrap paper notebook. Now that I've handled it, I can immediately feel the paper's resilience. Holding it in his hand, He Pingxing's eyes narrowed slightly. He discovered that the cover of the manual had changed. The previous cover had the words Basic Breathing Techniques on it. But now, it has become the 5 characters. Changchun Xing Qi Jie. Holy crap! He Pingxing's breathing became rapid. It's been changed. If the techniques have been changed, then it goes without saying that the basic breathing and exhalation methods have been strengthened. Take a look. So he opened the first page. The first page originally had a name written on it, Hao Yun. The proof is that it is Hao Yun's book. But now, there's only 1 word on it, heaven. What's the meaning? He Pingxing stared blankly at the character, Tan. Heaven sky, muttering to himself, could it be that this book was created by heaven? That should be it. As he spoke, he turned to another page. General outline. The general outline states that this is a cultivation method suitable for those with a wood attribute spiritual root. Then there are the specific techniques for each level. From the first level of qi refining to the 12th level of qi refining. Moreover, judging from the content, it seems to be much more extensive and detailed than Hao Yun's previous book. Take the first level of drawing qi into the body as an example. His method is quite different from the previous ones. In addition to the cultivation techniques, 2 wood attribute spells are appended at the end. He Pingxing was not in a hurry to cultivate. He reached out and took out a second book. I looked at the name, and it's different again. The title of this book is The True Method of Separating Fire. This. Different Types of Martial Arts Techniques. He Pingxing picked up the book again and started reading. The first page also contains only one word, heaven. The following is the general outline. The general outline states that this is a fire attribute cultivation technique, suitable for cultivators with fire attribute spiritual roots. Similarly, it is a complete cultivation method from the first level of Qi refining to the 12th level of Qi refining, with 2 minor fire attribute spells appended at the end. He Pingxing took a deep breath. Want to give it a try? Which one should we try? His gaze fell upon the fire attribute cultivation technique, the true method of separating fire. Let's try this one first. He Pingxing packed up all the other unnecessary items and hid them under the bed. Finally, he sat cross-legged on the bed and picked up the true method of separating fire. Read it thoroughly first, then try to understand it. Of course, you only need to understand the general principles and the first level first. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. These matters took up half a day of He Pingxing's time, and by the time he was able to cultivate, it was already noon. After a simple meal, He Pingxing began to draw qi into his body again. This moment, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth flowed slowly over the surface of his body. The tactile sensation became exceptionally clear. With a slight movement of his cultivation technique, fire attribute spiritual energy condensed and adhered to He Pingxing's skin. Then, under his guidance, the fire attribute spiritual energy attached to his skin slowly entered his flesh through the countless pores on his body. From the skin to the flesh. From flesh and blood, into the meridians. However, there is still a hurdle before entering the meridians. Spiritual root. The spiritual energy drawn into the body from the outside first enters the spiritual root. The meridians originate from the spiritual root. He Pingxing's spiritual roots are 5 spiritual roots. When the fire elemental energy he guided passed through the spiritual root, the 4 elemental roots of metal, wood, water, and earth naturally closed, leaving only the fire elemental root open. Although this spiritual energy was extremely weak, it still took him a lot of time to process it through his spiritual root. To put it simply, a spiritual root is like a water pipe. If it's too thin, it will block the flow of spiritual energy, thus affecting the efficiency of accumulating spiritual energy. This is also the fundamental reason why it is difficult to cultivate with the 5 elements spiritual roots. If one has only one spiritual root, these problems will not exist. Because the thickness of the single spiritual root is 10 times that of He Pingxing's fire spiritual root, the speed at which spiritual energy passes through it must be very fast. After passing through the spiritual root, the spiritual energy was compressed once before entering the meridians. It circulates through the meridians for 1 cycle, and then it will be refined. After refining, the essence is gathered in the dantian, and only then can the first level of the qi refining stage be achieved. Chapter 22 Qi Refining Level 3 1 hour later. Boom! With a muffled sound from within He Pingxing's body, he finally broke through to the first level of the qi refining stage. This. Sweating profusely, He Pingxing looked on with astonishment and joy. This is too incredible. He hadn't made any progress in a month of cultivation, but after only an hour, he broke through? The cultivation technique condensed from this treasure basin is naturally extremely heaven-defying, but it is far from being as heaven-defying as He Pingxing imagined. The reason he broke through so quickly is because he has been diligently drawing qi into his body for the past month. Otherwise, even if one were to cultivate this true fire separation method, it would take a whole day to draw qi into the body. An hour is absolutely impossible. This is. He Pingxing was suddenly shocked. Having broken through to the first level of the qi refining stage, He Pingxing suddenly felt as if he could see the condition inside his body. He saw his own flesh and blood, his own meridians, and his own dantian. And in the dantian, a small, finger-thick, crimson vortex of fire attribute energy was slowly rotating. Is this what internal vision is? He Pingxing was shocked. Legend has it that cultivators develop divine senses after reaching the qi refining stage. This divine sense is extremely weak, but it is enough to look inward at oneself and see the condition inside the body. That's great. Previously, drawing qi into the body relied entirely on feeling, but now I can watch myself cultivate. Wouldn't that be even faster? While He Pingxing was overjoyed, he did not forget the perilous road ahead. The path of cultivation is long and arduous. We've only just begun. So, I still need to continue my cultivation. He opened the second chapter of the true method of separating fire and began to study it carefully. This second article describes the method for cultivating from the first level of qi refining to the second level of qi refining. By evening, He Pingxing had finally mastered the method of the second chapter. After dinner, he sat cross-legged and began the second part of his practice. The cultivation of the second level of qi refining is different from that of the first level. The first level is simply guiding your qi into your body and gathering it in your dantian. However, advancing to the second level of cultivation requires accumulating quantity. One must continuously absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth to replenish oneself. He Pingxing's face turned bitter as soon as he began cultivating the second level. The spiritual root is too poor. The problem now is that he absorbs external spiritual energy quite quickly. A large amount of fire attribute spiritual energy entered the flesh and blood through the skin. Then it enters the meridians and spiritual root through the flesh and blood. But when it comes to spiritual roots, problems arise. Because the fire attribute spiritual root is too thin, it simply cannot accommodate too much spiritual power passing through at once. So no matter how fast he absorbs spiritual energy, it's useless. It simply won't pass. Let's talk about meridians again. Spiritual energy begins to circulate and condense as it enters the meridians from the spiritual root. The problem is that his meridians are functioning, but the spiritual energy within them is always at a low level. The same problem remains: the spiritual root is too thin. This thing is like drawing water from a large pool to a small pool. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth is like a large pool of water, while the meridians are like a small pool of water. But now there is no shortage of water in the large pool outside, but there is not enough water in the small pool. The reason for this is that the water pipes connecting the two pools are too thin, resulting in a slow flow rate. This is how He Pingxing is cultivating himself now. No wonder his single spiritual root was fast. Now, through introspection, he finally had a more direct understanding. Is the technique awesome? No. No matter how powerful a cultivation technique is, it can only refine spiritual energy quickly. But the spiritual energy enters too slowly, or even not at all. What good is a good cultivation technique if you can't get in? That being said, does having the 5 elemental spiritual roots mean one is truly unable to cultivate? No, not at all. If a spiritual force enters the meridians without passing through the spiritual root, the refining speed is still very fast. What kind of spiritual power can enter the meridians without going through the spiritual root? Elixir. Various natural and precious herbs used for external supplementation. After being devoured by cultivators, these things do not enter the meridians through the body's pores, flesh, blood, and spiritual roots like the spiritual energy in the outside world. Instead, they enter the meridians directly after being digested. In this way, the drawbacks of having poor spiritual roots can be avoided. On the other hand, wouldn't cultivators without spiritual roots also be able to cultivate by relying on elixirs? The answer is no. The meridians and dantian mentioned in spiritual practice are not the same as the meridians of blood in the human body. They are derivatives of the spiritual root. Without spiritual roots, there are no meridians. Therefore, cultivators who are born without any spiritual roots cannot cultivate even if they have elixirs. He Pingxing understood these basic principles of cultivation. So what's the next step? He Pingxing walked out of the courtyard and looked around. Under the cover of night, he sealed all the cracks in his doors and windows tightly, then broke a bottle of sesame oil before digging the 2 jade bottles out from under the bed and taking out a top-grade, qi gathering pill. A rich medicinal aroma instantly filled the small house. He Pingxing quickly smashed the pill, taking only 1/10 of it and putting the remaining 9/10 back into the porcelain bottle. He Pingxing then put 1/10 of the pill into a large porcelain bowl and filled it with water. In an instant, the powder of the pill dissolved into the water. The aroma of medicine in the surrounding area came to an abrupt end. He Pingxing buried the jade bottle back into the ground, then took a sip of water and began his cultivation. The exciting content. Boom! As the water, brimming with pure energy, entered his stomach, the immense and powerful energy surged into his meridians from all directions. At this moment, He Pingxing felt as if his meridians were about to explode. Actually, no. Because, relatively speaking, the spiritual energy in the qi gathering pill is the purest and gentlest. Even if it swallows 1 grain at a time, it will not explode. The only problem is that pills that cannot be refined in time will dissipate into the void, wasting valuable resources. He Pingxing quickly activated the fire attribute, true fire separation technique, and began refining it frantically. The spiritual energy circulates through the meridians once, is then refined, and then gathers into the vortex of energy in the dantian. Afterwards, the excess energy fills the meridians again, and is then refined and gathered in the dantian. It goes on, again and again. This bowl of water sustained He Pingxing for 3 days of cultivation. Although he failed to break through to the second level of qi refining during these 3 days of cultivation, when he looked into his dantian, the wisp of fire attribute crimson vortex in his dantian had more than doubled in size. 2 months later, after consuming approximately 2 top-grade qi gathering pills, He Pingxing finally broke through in his cultivation level. He progressed from the first level of qi refining to the second level of qi refining. About half a year later, He Pingxing consumed 7 more top-grade qi gathering pills. His cultivation level finally broke through to the third level of qi refining. It took 8 months to go from the first to the third level of the qi refining stage. A total of 9 top-grade qi gathering pills were consumed. Finally, I've reached the third level of qi refining. He Pingxing took a deep breath. My current cultivation level has surpassed that of senior brother Hao Yun back then. He pushed open the door. The outside world turned into a silvery white. It's snowing, and the new year is almost here. It's time to offer incense to our parents and senior brother Hao. Chapter 23 Spells Call. A fierce wind whipped up the snow, relentlessly lashing at He Pingxing. He Pingxing was only wearing a thin set of clothes, yet he seemed completely oblivious to the freezing cold. It is often said that those in the early stages of qi refining are no different from ordinary people, but that is not true. Once you enter the qi refining stage, you become very different from ordinary people. For example, they are not afraid of the cold, they are not easily hungry or cold, and they are not prone to getting sick, etc. Rise. On the hillside, He Pingxing could often leap several meters high. So even in the wind and snow, climbing the mountain is as easy as walking on flat ground. To put it simply, if he were to go to Xianxia Peak to fetch water right now, he could do it in 20 trips a day, which would take at most an hour. That's how big the difference is. A pot of liquor, and a few stacks of paper money. 3 sticks of incense. After offering sacrifices to his parents and fellow disciple Hao Yun, He Pingxing slowly walked down the mountain. Instead of returning directly to his small courtyard, he walked towards the tall hall on the other side of the river. Outer Gate Main Hall. Despite the snowy weather, people were coming and going in a constant stream, and no one really paid attention to He Pingxing's cultivation level. He Pingxing slowly walked into the main hall and looked around. A striking message flashed in his pupils on the screen to his left. The pill refining room on Xianxia Peak will be hiring 1 more pill refining child. There is no limit to their cultivation level, and they will receive 200 contribution points per month. Don't worry, there will absolutely be no bullying of the pill refining child. He Pingxing frowned slightly. Good heavens, Xianxia Peak still hasn't found Dantong? It becomes clear once you think about it. The Taishu sect is both large and small. News of what happens on any peak will quickly reach the outer sect. Hao Yun's tragic death will surely serve as a wake-up call for countless outer disciples. Compared to life, what are these mere 200 contribution points? Of course, judging from the notes following the message, Xianxia Peak has been unable to find Dantong for more than half a year, and they are probably really anxious now. He Pingxing smiled coldly, left the array light membrane on the left, and came to the counter in the middle of the hall. There were more than a dozen people who handled miscellaneous tasks for the outer disciples, but Pingxing didn't go to the same person as last time. Instead, he went to another place. Senior brother, I'd like to buy some spirit rice. Pingxing no longer wanted to eat ordinary rice. Spirit rice is of great benefit to cultivators' practice. All right. The cultivator took Pingxing's card and looked at it, saying, "What kind of spirit rice does this junior brother want to buy?" There are 3 grades, superior, medium, and inferior. Without a second thought, Pingxing said, "Let's go with the lower grade." He doesn't need to buy high-quality ones. Because of the existence of the treasure bowl, anything placed inside can become a top-quality item. Oh! The cultivator said, "Low-grade spirit rice, 1 contribution point per pound. How much do you need?" Pingxing said, "Give me 200 catties first. 200 jin is 200 points. This stuff is much more expensive than regular rice. Ordinary rice, even 200 catties, only contributes 2 or 3 points. All right." The cultivator handed Pingxing a card for picking up goods, saying, "Take this card and go to the warehouse to collect the spirit rice." "Thank you." Pingxing politely accepted the playing card. The disciple said, "Junior brother, you're at the 3rd level of qi refining, right? Actually, you could consider going to Xianxia Mountain to do some missions. If you catch any spirit beasts or gather any spirit herbs, you can bring them back to the sect to exchange for contribution points." Now that the heavy snow has blocked the mountains, many spirit beasts have nowhere to hide, making it the perfect time to capture them. "Look, there are related tasks on the formation over there." The man pointed to the array sign. Pingxing said, "Okay, senior brother." After leaving the counter and taking the spirit rice, Pingxing bought some everyday trinkets and then returned directly to his courtyard. Doing a task? I still have so many contribution points. What task should I do? Isn't cultivation more appealing? Let's improve our cultivation level first. Pingxing made a decision. This time he would go into seclusion and break through to the 4th level of the qi refining stage. You cannot leave until you reach the 4th level. Just now in the outer hall, the reason why the cultivator was able to see through Pingxing's cultivation level of the 3rd level of qi refining at a glance was because his divine sense could be released outwards. With a single thought, nothing could escape his notice. But Pingxing couldn't do that. To project one's divine sense outwards, one's cultivation level must advance from the early stage of qi refining to the middle stage. In other words, the 4th layer. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd levels of the qi refining stage are referred to as the initial stage. The 4th, 5th, and 6th layers are referred to as the intermediate stage. The 7th, 8th, and 9th layers are referred to as the later stages. The 10th, 11th, and 12th levels are referred to as the perfect stage. Therefore, to project one's divine sense outwards, one must be at least at the 4th level. Moreover, after releasing one's divine sense, in addition to being able to use it to scan the surroundings and the cultivation levels of others, there is another huge benefit: cultivating spells. Only after one's divine sense can be projected outward can one cultivate various magical arts. Bang! Once you get home, close the door. Pingxing then tightly sealed the cracks in his door to prevent any odors from escaping. Then he continued his spiritual practice. He took out 2 jade bottles. One of the jade bottles contained 12 pills, while the other contained only 3 pills. There are 15 in total. In other words, he had used a total of 9 pills to break through from the 1st level of qi refining to the 3rd level of qi refining. I hope these 15 pills will allow me to break through to the 4th level of cultivation. My dear reader, there's more to, even more exciting content awaits. Pingxing took a deep breath, then took out a pill and swallowed it. That's right. With the improvement of his cultivation level, he can now refine spiritual energy much faster. He no longer needs to break pills and use water to help him absorb them, as he did when he first started cultivating. Boom! As soon as the whole pill entered his stomach, countless pure energies surged from it and flowed into his meridians. There is another difference between swallowing elixirs for cultivation and drawing qi into the body. That is, drawing in qi into the body involves 5 kinds of spiritual qi: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Only after being filtered and selected can qi enter the body. The spiritual energy within these pills is not divided into the 5 elements. It is the purest energy. After being refined through the meridians, it automatically transforms into spiritual energy of the corresponding element once it is gathered into a vortex of that element. Winter goes and spring comes, and all things revive. After another 6 months, He Pingxing finally broke through to the 4th level of cultivation after consuming 13 spirit pills. Boom! At the moment of breakthrough, a sudden enlightenment was released from his body. Within a radius of 10 feet, even outside the houses, everything was within his sight, radiating one's divine thoughts outward. Great! He Pingxing opened his eyes, a gleam in them. Ha ha ha! I can start practicing magic soon. So-called magic is simply a variety of methods: attack, defense, support, and many more. He Pingxing turned to the very last page of the true method of separating fire, where the cultivation methods for 2 spells were recorded. First, Fire Crow Technique. Secondly, Fire Shield. Chapter 24: Refining the Treasure Basin Fire Crow Technique, Fire Shield Technique. Which path should we cultivate? He Pingxing took a look first. This Fire Crow Technique, once mastered, allows one to release and condense fire crows from their internal fire elemental power, which can then be used to attack enemies. This is just a low-level spell. However, its offensive power is not to be underestimated. Once you've reached a minor level of mastery in cultivation, you can release a fire crow, which you can control with your divine sense to attack enemies within a 10-jong radius. It won't work any further, because He Pingxing's divine sense can only extend 10 jong, approximately 33 meters, outwards now. If one cultivates to the highest level, one can release 9 fire crows at once to fight the enemy. If one cultivates to the perfect state, one can release 108 flames in one breath, with unparalleled attack power. The flock of crows flying around could easily kill even a cultivator at the 12th level of the qi refining stage. Of course, it is very difficult to cultivate to perfection. Let's talk about the Fire Shield spell. This is a defensive spell. After cultivation, one can instantly form a fire attribute shield, capable of blocking an attack from an enemy of the same cultivation level. In conclusion, both spells are very useful to He Pingxing right now. Which one should we practice first? It's definitely the Fire Crow spell. What's the use of having the best defense if you can't attack? Therefore, offensive spells should be prioritized. He Pingxing first memorized the cultivation techniques of the Fire Crow technique, and then began to practice it in his room. In the early stages, there's no need to worry about the fire burning down your room, because he simply cannot condense flames. When the fire elemental energy circulates normally within the meridians, it can condense into the shape of a fire crow. Spells are easier to use than cultivation. As long as you use the right method, it's just a matter of honing your skills. The first step will be completed when you can draw the fire elemental energy from your body into your body. This skill doesn't depend on qualifications, only on proficiency. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 days have passed. He Pingxing was practicing the Fire Crow technique as usual when suddenly, a flame emerged from the palm of his right hand, instantly transforming into a dazzling crow. The crow wasn't big, only slightly larger than a palm. The crow was glowing with blinding firelight, flapping its wings incessantly in his palm as if it were about to take flight at any moment. He Pingxing was overjoyed. He took a deep breath and withdrew his magic power. With the fire spirit power gone, the fire crow in his palm naturally lost its foundation and disappeared instantly. The room is too cramped, we can't work out. Let's find a secluded place to test my supernatural powers. He Pingxing stood up, patted himself, and was about to walk outside when he suddenly saw the treasure basin lying under the bed. This place is different from Xiaoju Peak. Someone could break into his house at any time. The scene of my parents' precious child being snatched away is still vivid in my mind. Therefore, He Pingxing was not at ease leaving the treasure basin in the house after he left. While it's highly likely that even a thief wouldn't touch this thing, what if they did? This is a treasure. He Pingxing couldn't afford to gamble. but carrying it around would be too much trouble. Sigh. He couldn't help but sigh deeply. If only I had a storage bag. Unfortunately, this is just a beautiful wish. Even among the most gifted inner disciples of the Taishu sect, over 99% do not possess such high-level items as storage bags. This kind of thing is usually only something that elders in the foundation establishment stage are entitled to possess. How could he dare to hope for such a thing? Maybe we should just bury it. He Pingxing picked up the treasure basin. However, just as he was about to dig into the ground, a flash of inspiration struck him. When he was young, he saw his father cut his finger and drip his blood onto the ritual implement. Does this mean that a drop of blood on this treasure can make it recognize its owner? Give it a try. If that doesn't work, then burying it underground is not too late. With a try-and-see attitude, he Pingxing took out a small knife from the table and slashed his left hand, making a small cut. A few drops of blood flowed out instantly. He Pingxing simply dropped a drop of blood into the treasure basin. Soon, a miraculous scene unfolded. Where the blood dripped, a golden light suddenly flashed out. Then, the blood flowed along the previously invisible patterns and instantly merged into the center of the entire treasure basin. In just a few breaths, the blood disappeared. Again. He Pingxing shed another drop of blood, and another golden light flashed out. After this happened several times, the basin suddenly changed, and with a whoosh, it transformed into a beam of purple-gold light and flew into He Pingxing's body. This. He Pingxing was dumbfounded. Where is my baby? Where is the basin? Is it lost? The next moment, He Pingxing's mind flashed, and he looked inward at himself. Within that dantian, beneath a crimson vortex of energy, lay a black basin lying quietly. What else could it be but a treasure bowl? Come. He Pingxing's mind stirred. With a whoosh, the treasure basin transformed back into golden light and flew out, landing in He Pingxing's hands. Return. With another thought, the treasure basin returned to the dantian. Hiss hiss hiss. Very good. He Pingxing laughed heartily, then plopped down on the bed with a thud and took a deep breath. From now on, I will never have to worry about this treasure bowl being stolen again. After a long while, He Pingxing's excitement subsided, and he began to think things through again. The exciting content. The treasure bowl has been put away. But there are 2 jade bottles inside the room. These 2 pill bottles also contain 2 top-grade qi gathering pills. What should we do with them? Carry it with you at all times? I just don't know if you can put items in this treasure bowl and then put it away. Give it a try. Come. With a thought, He Pingxing brought the treasure basin to his hand. When? A loud bang. He Pingxing then threw the 2 jade bottles into the basin. Receive. Then we can collect the treasure bowl. Call out. The treasure bowl was indeed stored in the dantian. He Pingxing scanned himself with his divine sense and found that there were indeed 2 more jade bottles in the treasure basin in his dantian. Hi. It really can be stored inside. Since we can include it, let's include it all. Come. He Pingxing summoned the treasure basin from his dantian and then put the 2 books inside as well. Besides the 2 books, he discovered a bag of spirit rice in the room. It weighs about 100 kilograms. That definitely won't fit. He Pingxing had tried it before, and this basin could only hold about 10 kilograms of spirit rice. No more than that. Sigh. He sighed. It's a bit small. If only this treasure bowl could be bigger. As a result, as soon as He Pingxing finished speaking, the treasure bowl on the table suddenly grew larger. It went from being the size of a normal basin to the size of a bathtub. Now, putting the spirit rice in was definitely no problem. However, He Pingxing wasn't in the mood to put in the spirit rice right now. He looked at the treasure basin excitedly and said, "Bigger, bigger, bigger." The treasure bowl grew bigger and bigger. Finally, the entire basin reached a diameter of 3 feet, and then it stopped growing. In other words, this 3-foot size is the limit for the basin. Chapter 25 Fire Crow Receive. He Pingxing put all his belongings into the treasure basin, and then stored them in his dantian. What's next? He also possessed 2 top-grade Qi gathering pills. However, these 2 pills are definitely not enough for him to break through to the 5th level of the Qi refining stage. If you want to continue to break through, you can only rely on long-term practice of drawing Qi into your body. Given He Pingsheng's 5 elements spiritual root aptitude, it would truly be a very long time, and perhaps he would never be able to cultivate to the 5th level through breathing exercises in his entire life. Therefore, we still need to find cultivation resources. Before we search for cultivation resources, let's go out and try out this spell first. He Pingsheng went out and walked into the mountains. It's definitely not feasible in a small town, since no one knows how powerful the fire crow is, and it wouldn't be good if it caught someone's attention. Over the past year, as his cultivation level improved, He Pingsheng's mind gradually opened up. Things he couldn't understand before, or things he couldn't figure out, he could now understand. Of course, in terms of personality, he remains as cautious as ever. His caution was not innate, but rather a lesson he learned after witnessing his parents' murder. In the deserted mountains, He Pingsheng walked for 2 days in the opposite direction from Taishu sect before finally stopping. We're already this far away. Even if we make a commotion, it shouldn't alert the Taishu sect, right? He Pingsheng stopped in a primeval forest. In front of him, behind him, and all around him were towering ancient trees. The ground was slippery with moss, and the sun was not visible overhead. Only the babbling of the stream flowing down from the mountaintop to the left seemed to give He Pingsheng a sense of reality in this world. Gather! He Pingsheng took a deep breath, and the fire attribute spiritual power in his body surged out wildly, quickly gathering into a ball of fire in the palm of his right hand. As the flames flickered, they formed the shape of a crow. The crow flaps its wings, its image incredibly lifelike. Go! With a thought, He Ping controlled the fire crow to fly forward. 3 jong away, the fire crow suddenly crashed headfirst into the trunk of a tree that was as thick as a person's embrace. Bang! A violent explosion was heard. A fire attribute aura rushed towards us. Caught off guard, He Pingsheng was actually blown back 3 steps by the heat wave. Then, looking up again, they saw a large, dark hole in the trunk of a tree 3 jong away, with flames burning at the entrance. The flames grew stronger and stronger, crackling and popping. Bang! In less than 3 breaths, the towering ancient tree snapped in half and fell heavily to the ground along with its branches. However, the fire on the tree trunk was growing increasingly fierce. Oh no! He Pingsheng slapped his forehead and exclaimed, "We mustn't start a wildfire." He quickly took out the treasure basin and hurriedly ran to the stream not far away to fetch water. After fetching the water, he poured it directly onto the flames. A miraculous scene unfolded. He Pingsheng poured 5 or 6 basins of water on the flames, but instead of being extinguished, they grew even stronger. That's strange. How come the fire can't be extinguished with water? He Pingsheng looked worried and ran over himself to put out the fire with rocks and soil. He tried his best, but the fire finally went out on its own after burning the entire tree. Call! He Pingsheng took a deep breath, then sat down on the ground somewhat disheveled, looking at his palm and muttering, "Could it be that the flame refined with spiritual power is different from ordinary flames? This strike is powerful enough to break an old tree, so it must be quite formidable. I wonder how it would fare against a cultivator, whether it would be comparable to a disciple of the same level." Next, He Pingsheng dared not hit the trees anymore. He found a rocky area without trees or withered grass, then conjured a fire crow and hurled it fiercely at the cliff face. Bang! The next moment, rocks flew everywhere. A large black hole was smashed into the cliff. So powerful! He Pingsheng was somewhat astonished. He hadn't expected that smashing a rock could create such a large hole. Again. Bang! 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 After unleashing 12 fire crows in succession, He Pingsheng's fire attribute spiritual energy was finally exhausted. In other words, he can only unleash 12 attacks of this magnitude in one go. If the enemy cannot be defeated within 12 attempts, then one will have no choice but to flee. Because there was no reference point, and He Pingsheng had never fought anyone before, and did not know how powerful other Qi refining stage 4 spells were, He Pingsheng had witnessed his own spells, but did not know how he compared to others. He felt that his aptitude was far inferior to those genius cultivators, so he habitually assumed that his magic was also inferior to others. But if other cultivators of the same level were to see his fire crow technique, they would be utterly astonished. After the spell test was completed, He Pingxing returned to the small town along the same route. The whole trip took 5 days. Upon arriving at the outer gate town, He Pingxing did not go home immediately, but instead returned to the outer gate main hall. Upon entering the bustling main hall, He Pingxing's divine sense involuntarily extended, allowing him to clearly see the cultivation levels of all the cultivators within a 10-foot radius. There are Qi refining stage 1, 2, and 3 levels. There are also 4 floors. However, there aren't many 4-story buildings. As for the floors above the 4th level, He Pingxing found that he could not see through them. Of the more than 100 people bustling around the entire hall, only 3 had cultivation levels that were impossible to discern. He Pingxing was secretly pleased with himself. Senior brother. The disciple in charge of miscellaneous tasks sitting in the middle of the main hall saw He Pingxing coming over and took the initiative to stand up and call him senior brother. He Pingxing had never enjoyed such treatment before.
师兄，您要办理什么事？那杂役弟子恭恭敬敬地看着贺平生。贺平生神念扫了一下，发现对方只是个3层，于是笑了笑，道：“师弟，听说咱们太虚门有个针对外门弟子开放的倡议阁，我想过去看看，不知道怎么才能进得去。”所谓的倡议阁，比这外门大殿的杂物办理处稍微高级了一些，里面出售一些外门弟子所需的修行物品。可这里并不是随便什么外门弟子都能进入的，它的进入门槛就是炼气中期，也就是最低4层。师兄，你已经到4层了吧？对面弟子满脸恭敬。贺平生点点头，到了。那就好。那人道：“师兄，倡议阁就在咱们外门大殿的2层，您可以从旁边那里进去，那边有个楼梯。不过进去之前是要测试一下修为的，只要到了4层，便有专门的人引您上去。”好。贺平生大喜过望，便朝那通往倡议阁的楼梯走了过去。喜欢聚宝仙盆，请大家收藏3w.shuaige.net。聚宝仙盆书海格小说网更新速度全网最快。
Chapter 26 Can't afford it. He Pingxing looked in the direction pointed out by the Qi refining stage 3 disciple and indeed saw the staircase entrance in a corner of the main hall. Thank you, junior brother. He Pingxing bowed in thanks and walked towards the stairwell. I climbed the stairs and went up to the 2nd floor. First, we entered a room. An old man dressed in a grey robe sat in the room, but he couldn't discern the old man's cultivation level. However, the old man's sharp gaze swept over He Pingxing and he said, "The 4th floor. Is this your first time here?" He Pingxing replied respectfully, "Yes, this is my first time here." No need for such a dress. The grey-robed elder waved his hand and said, "You are at the 4th level of Qi refining, while I am at the 9th level. Although there is a difference, we are both at the Qi refining stage. You can just call me senior brother from now on. I am not worthy of the title of senior." "Yes, senior brother." He Pingxing quickly corrected himself. The old man in grey said, "Go in. This hurdle has been overcome." He Pingxing breathed a sigh of relief, politely bowed to the grey-robed old man again, and then turned and walked into the hall on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor is the same size as the 1st floor. The only difference is that the bustling atmosphere of the 1st floor is gone. Only a dozen or so disciples were moving back and forth among the various shelves. Junior brother. A disciple at the 5th level of Qi refining approached He Pingxing, smiled slightly, and said, "Are you here to select some items?" "Please come with me." He Pingxing said, "No. This is my first time here, I'll just take a look around first." "All right," the man said. "Then feel free to look around. If you find anything you like, you can buy it. Each item has a price listed below it." He Pingxing thanked him and then wandered around the huge 2nd floor by himself. There were other cultivators on the second floor, but not many. For He Pingsheng, the best option would be to purchase some discarded pills at a very low price, then use the treasure basin to enhance their quality before finally using them. But he also knew that this was wishful thinking. Because it's impossible for Changi Pavilion to sell waste pills. Then I'll use a low-grade qi gathering pill. Hopefully the price won't be too outrageous. He Pingsheng first searched along the shipping containers and soon arrived at the elixir shipping container. A huge shipping container, filled with all sorts of elixirs. Qi gathering pill, golden bone pill, vital essence nourishing pill, marrow cleansing pill, bigu pill, etc. The most common of these is the bigu pill. He Pingsheng glanced at it and saw that a batch of bigu pills cost 800 contribution points. One batch contains 12 grains. Fasting pills cannot assist in spiritual practice. But it has one advantage: fasting. Disciples in the qi refining stage have to take care of chores such as eating and drinking while cultivating, and cannot concentrate on cultivation. If they had a fasting pill, they could avoid these chores. Each pill of the bigu pill can allow a person to go without food or water for up to a month. One batch of fasting pills can support a cultivator's expenses for a year. But after looking at the price, He Pingsheng said he couldn't afford it. Too expensive. He only has a little over 1,000 contribution points. Let's look at the rest. Low-grade qi gathering pill. This stuff is much more expensive than fasting pills. Because it is an elixir used for cultivation, which can enhance one's cultivation level, it is incomparable to crude things like the bigu pill. This product is not sold by the furnace, but by the grain. One low-grade qi gathering pill requires 2 low-grade spirit stones. Therefore, they don't want contribution points, they only want spirit stones. He Pingsheng wanted to buy some qi gathering pills, but unfortunately he didn't have any spirit stones. Of course, as a disciple of a cultivation family, He Pingsheng couldn't possibly be unaware of what spirit stones were. Spirit stones are a special type of stone. Each low-grade spirit stone is about the size of a jujube and is divided into 5 different attributes: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Each stone contains different spiritual energy of the 5 elements. This thing can aid in cultivation and serve as an energy source for formations. Of course, it can also serve as the driving energy source for certain flying magical artifacts. Because of its wide range of uses, it has become the common currency in the cultivation world. He Pingsheng had seen this before. After his parents died, there were several dozen of them in his house, but they were later stolen by unidentified people. Not a single piece remained. Senior brother. He Pingsheng saw the sales assistant and walked over to ask, how many contribution points are needed to exchange for 1 spirit stone? He. The disciple in blue chuckled and said, Junior brother, you may not know this, but contribution points and spirit stones cannot be freely exchanged. Some items can be purchased with just contribution points, but some precious items require spirit stones. Do you understand? I understand. He Pingsheng wasn't stupid, he grasped the point immediately. He Pingsheng continued looking at the shelves. Qi gathering pill, low grade, 1 pill can be purchased for 2 spirit stones. Golden bone pill, low grade, 1 pill for every spirit stone. Marrow cleansing pill, low grade, 5 spirit stones per pill. All of these pills cost spirit stones. He Pingsheng's gaze shifted, and he noticed some herbs near the shelf. 10 7-leaf spirit grasses, 1 spirit stone. 10 spirit apricots and 2 spirit stones. 10 bamboo shoots, 1 spirit stone. 10 vermilion fruits and 3 spirit stones. He Pingsheng narrowed his eyes. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. The 4 spiritual herbs, 7-leaf spirit grass, vermilion fruit, immortal bamboo shoot, and spirit apricot, are all first-grade spiritual herbs. Together, these 4 herbs form the refining materials for the qi gathering pill. In other words, the above-mentioned spiritual herbs are the materials required for 10 batches of qi gathering pills. It only costs 7 spirit stones to purchase. If all 10 batches are successfully refined, even if they are all of low grade, there will still be 120 pieces. One is worth 2 spirit stones, so that's 240 spirit stones. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Compared to materials costing 7 spirit stones, the price is more than 30 times higher. Of course. The success rate of alchemy is very low. For some alchemists, 10 sets of materials can only produce 1 batch of pills. These 12 pills can be sold for 24 spirit stones. So, the premium is more than 3 times. However, alchemy is not that simple. Besides purchasing materials, you also need an alchemy furnace, alchemy recipes, and flames, among other things. Ordinary outer disciples have no chance to enter the alchemy room to refine pills. However, if one were to refine pills at home, the success rate would decrease by more than tenfold. Therefore, He Pingxing immediately abandoned the idea of selling materials to refine pills. The key issue is that he doesn't have any spirit stones either. He Pingxing shook his head and left the shelf selling pills. Let's go explore other places. Beginner flying sword, a first-grade magic weapon, priced at 60 spirit stones. Azure wood shield, a first-grade magic weapon that can defend against spell attacks from cultivators of the same level when opened. Price, 130 spirit stones. Ice needle talisman, a first-grade talisman that summons ice needles upon use, equivalent to a full force attack from a 7th level chi refining cultivator. Priced at 60 spirit stones. This is really good stuff. Unfortunately, I can't afford it. I really can't afford it. Chapter 27 Valley of Spirit Medicine Ritual Implements. Talismans. Elixir. Cultivation techniques. Wait, we have everything. Of course, this only applies to first-grade items, which are all items needed by Qi refining stage disciples. He Pingxing also saw a paper crane. Paper crane, priced at 2 spirit stones. What is this? He Pingxing asked the disciple in blue robes beside him with some curiosity. The disciple in green robes said, "This is a paper crane. When you pour your magic power into it, it can be activated. Once activated, it will transform into a crane that can carry 1,000 pounds and fly for a day. Flying 10,000 miles in a single day." He Pingxing was immediately stunned. One day? Flying thousands of miles? Oh my God! Moreover, the disciple in blue held up 3 more fingers. This thing can be reused 3 times, making it an indispensable item for us Qi refining stage disciples when we travel far away. He Pingxing understood. To put it bluntly, this paper crane is essentially a puppet. Once a cultivator reaches the foundation establishment stage, they can fly on a sword, covering thousands of miles in an instant. Disciples who are not yet at the foundation establishment stage do not have this ability and can only rely on other external means to travel far. This paper crane is one of them. This is really good stuff. Senior brother. He Pingxing asked again, "If you have any good items, do you buy them here?" Of course. The disciple in blue smiled and said, "If you have anything good, junior brother, we'll buy it too. What about yours?" Oh. He Pingxing pulled a book from his pocket and said, "What do you think of this acquisition?" The monk in blue glanced over and saw several large characters written on the book, 36 formulas for refining elixir. This is not the book that Hao Yun gave him before. The book 36 Formulas for Alchemy that Hao Yun gave to He Pingxing was placed in the treasure basin by He Pingxing. After being enhanced by the treasure basin, it turned into 2 books. But the name hasn't changed. It's still 36 Formulas for Refining Elixir. He Pingxing had no way to make a comparison, but based on his previous memories of the 36 alchemy formulas, he knew that the enhanced 36 formulas contained much more content and some of it had been deleted. Clearly, this item is far more valuable than the original 36 cubes. He Pingxing wanted to exchange for some resources, and this was the only thing he could offer. Why? Because there's no risk. If they find out about me later, I'll just say it was Hao Yun who gave it to me. How can you investigate further? Is this it? The disciple in blue robes looked at the 36 cubes in He Pingxing's hand and couldn't help but sneer. Junior brother, come with me. He Pingxing followed him over. We arrived at a place where books were stored. On the bookshelf, there was a book titled 36 Formulas for Alchemy. 36 Recipes for Alchemy, priced at 1 spirit stone. Hehehe. The disciple in blue chuckled. The sect has plenty of these things, we won't accept them. This. He Pingxing explained, mine is different from yours, mine is more detailed and more advanced. Nonsense. The disciple in blue immediately looked displeased and said, these 36 alchemy formulas have been passed down since ancient times. They are not only used by our Taishu sect. Countless sects throughout the cultivation world use them. Your prescription is different from ordinary prescriptions. Isn't this just swindling? Junior brother, please put your books away and come downstairs. Don't force me to call for help. Hi. He Pingxing took a deep breath, could only put the 36 formulas for alchemy into his pocket, and then shook his head helplessly and left. That's enough. Anyway, we won't lose money. Come down from the second floor to the first floor. He Pingxing looked completely bewildered. We can't afford the resources. What about the subsequent spiritual practice? How can I obtain spirit stones? Go ask that kid. He Pingxing walked towards the counter in the middle of the hall. The disciple who had just greeted He Pingxing stood up, a smile plastered on his face. Senior brother, did you go upstairs? He Pingxing nodded, then said, brother, let me ask you something. How can outer disciples like us obtain spirit stones? The disciple hesitated for a moment, then said, under normal circumstances, we outer disciples cannot possess spirit stones. This stuff, each inner disciple of the sect receives between 10 and 30 yuan per month. If we outer disciples want to obtain spirit stones, we can only do so by trading with those inner disciples. Or do things for others. Or, we could sell some items. Also, the sect has some special missions that also reward spirit stones. He Pingxing nodded. Special missions within a sect are generally very dangerous. No one would be willing to do this kind of task if it didn't offer spirit stones as a reward. For example, the disciple continued, Xianxia Peak couldn't recruit any alchemy disciples for a while, but after promising a reward of 2 spirit stones per month, they still got snapped up by everyone, didn't they? He Pingxing turned his head and couldn't help but look at the array light membrane on the left. Sure enough, the news that Xianxia Peak was recruiting alchemists disappeared. Actually, there's another way, the disciple in blue robes whispered. I've heard that the work at the Spirit Medicine Valley is quite good. If you can get into the Spirit Medicine Valley and take good care of the spirit herbs, the elders there will reward you with some spirit stones if they're happy. Moreover, it's said that this Spirit Medicine Valley is the most lucrative place in the Taishu sect. This chapter is not finished. Please click the next page to continue reading. I dare not hide it from my senior brother, the disciple continued. The elders of this Spirit Herb Valley are actually quite fierce. If you don't take good care of these herbs, you will often be scolded and even beaten. But the advantage is that no one has ever died in the Spirit Medicine Valley, so the elders know how to use their strength. Look, there's a notice here recruiting outer disciples for the Spirit Medicine Valley. He Pingxing looked over. Sure enough, there was a message on the light membrane. Spirit Herb Valley is recruiting 1 fire attribute disciple to care for the blazing sunflower in the valley. The reward is 200 contribution points per month. That's all the specific information I have. He Pingxing's mind started working. He's suited for this job. First, he is a disciple with the fire attribute. Secondly, he possesses a treasure basin, which allows him to slightly adjust the quality of the medicinal herbs he harvests. If we bring out something the elders like, it should be possible to get some spirit stones as a reward. Besides, being in a good position, my treasure basin can be divided into 2. If given the opportunity, it's not impossible to obtain some spiritual herbs. Let's do it. All right. He Pingxing said, Junior brother, I'll take the mission from Spirit Herb Valley. It just so happens that my main cultivation is the fire elemental root. Okay, the disciple in green said, I'll contact my senior brother in Spirit Medicine Valley right away, but he'll need to test your fire spirit power strength later. If it doesn't meet his requirements, He won't accept you. 3 to 5 people applied before, but none of them were selected. Hearing this, He Pingxing was somewhat disappointed. If others can't do it, how can I, with my 5-element spiritual root, succeed? Chapter 28. The Deadwood Immortal. About an hour later, a plump disciple dressed in a blue Taoist robe arrived at the outer hall. Senior Brother Wang is here. I found you a disciple who specializes in fire elemental roots. Please take a look. All right. Senior Brother Wang's expression wasn't good. He looked at He Pingxing and said, "He's only at the 4th level of qi refining, is that enough?" The disciple's face immediately fell. "Senior Brother Wang, it's been so long, and nobody has shown any interest. You know the situation of your spirit medicine valley yourself. How about this, you try it first, and if it doesn't work, then just keep waiting." Senior Brother Wang, his name is Wang Dun. Qi refining stage 6. After hearing what the disciple in blue said, Wang Dun took a deep breath and said, "So be it, let it be." You. Wang Dun looked at He Pingxing and said, "Release some of the fire elemental power within you, let me see how good its quality is. If you get 7 or 8 points, I'll take you to the valley for another test." Yes. He Pingxing dared not delay. He slowly extended his right hand, and the true fire technique within his body circulated. In an instant, a cluster of fire attribute spiritual power burst forth from his palm. The flames were crimson red, with some white interspersed throughout. Oh! Wang Dun was slightly surprised and said, "The quality is quite good, the fire elemental energy is extremely pure. Come on, put away your magic power and come with me to the Spirit Medicine Valley, let's test it again." Hearing Wang Dun say this, He Pingxing breathed a sigh of relief. Then he followed Wang Dun and went up the mountain again. The entire inner sect of Taishu sect is located on the mountain. Last year, He Pingxing went up and down the Taishu sect several times, and each time he was exhausted. Now that he has reached the 4th level of qi refining, it is much easier for him to go up the mountain. He can often leap across dozens of feet in one bound, scaling walls and rooftops as if walking on flat ground. By worldly standards, he would already be a true martial arts master. About half an hour later, Wang Dun and He Pingxing arrived at a valley. Call. Taking a deep breath, He Pingxing felt that the spiritual energy here was more than 10 times denser than outside. However, it wasn't very useful to him. If your spiritual root is too weak, even the best spiritual energy won't help, because you can't refine it in time. He Pingxing, right? Come with me, watch your step, don't run around. Wang Dun led He Pingxing through the valley. On both sides of the valley are patches of spiritual fields. Lingtian rice and noodles is planted with various plants. Most of it is ling rice. A small portion consists of medicinal herbs. The deeper you go, the denser the spiritual energy becomes. When you reach the innermost part of the valley, the plants grown in the spiritual energy fields on both sides have all turned into spiritual herbs. It has everything from 7-leaf spirit grass, spirit apricot, vermilion fruit, and immortal bamboo shoots. However, they are all just first-grade medicinal herbs. He Pingxing recognized all these things because he had already read through the 36 formulas for alchemy and knew all the herbs listed. Deep inside this valley, there is a patch of fiery red plants. These are the blazing sunflowers. Wang Dun pointed to the fiery red plant and said, "They are in full bloom now, and there are a total of 560 of them here. They are 2nd-grade spiritual herbs. Come here." Not far from the sunflower, there is a huge rock. Wang Dun said, "Send some of your spiritual power onto this stone, and the purity of your spiritual power will naturally be displayed on the stone. If you pass the test, you can stay. Let's begin." All right. He Pingxing took a deep breath and then circulated his spiritual energy. He drew fire elemental energy from his dantian, circulated it through his meridians, and finally released it from his palm. However, this time He Pingxing was careful. He did not unleash his full spiritual power, but only released about half of it and then covered the stone with it. Buzzing. The stone seemed to possess magic. It suddenly changed color when He Pingxing unleashed his fire elemental power. It changed from gray to crimson, then from crimson to yellow, and from yellow to gold. Under Wang Dun's shocked gaze, He Pingxing withdrew the fire elemental power in his hand. Impressive. Wang Dun clapped his hands and said, Impressive, impressive. Junior brother is amazing. You're only at the 4th level of qi refining, yet the quality of your fire elemental power has reached the high grade. Junior brother's cultivation method must be extraordinary. He Pingxing's heart skipped a beat. Oh no, we've been exposed. However, Wang Dun added, some of the disciples from before reached the 7th or 8th level of qi refining, but their fire spirit power quality couldn't reach the high grade. Of course, here, the middle grade is enough. Junior brother, come with me to see Senior Kumu. He is an elder from the Spirit Medicine Valley of our Taishu sect. Yes. He Pingxing quickly followed behind Wang Dun. The two continued walking into the Spirit Valley, where a misty fog began to rise up. The deepest part of this valley has a dreamlike appearance. Wang Dun explained, there is an array set up by our predecessors here, which is why these illusions exist. You don't need to come here to serve us normally. Don't you dare break in. He Pingxing replied, yes. As they were talking, the two suddenly found themselves in a cave. Senior Kumu. Wang Dun bowed respectfully before the cave and said, this disciple has found the person to care for the blazing sunflower. Please grant me your command, Senior Kumu. As soon as Wang Dun finished speaking, the thin layer of mist at the entrance of the cave vanished instantly. A thin, short old man walked out from inside. This man's face was as white as withered wood, and his hair and beard were all white. He glanced at He Pingxing and said, 4th level of qi refining, can you withstand it? Wang Dun smiled bitterly, Senior, I've searched many people these days, and this is the only one who meets the requirements. Forget it. Master Kumu pulled out a black token, handed it to He Pingxing, and said, this is the token for the Elixir Valley. With this token, you can come and go as you please between the valley and the Taishu sect. But keep this in mind, don't wander off blindly. If you run onto another peak and get yourself a good beating, that has nothing to do with this old man. Taking the token, He Pingxing said, yes, your junior will keep that well in mind. Master Kumu continued, the kid before you actually did a decent job. It's just a pity that the fellow loved a good brawl out there and ended up dead. There are still 3 months left in the blooming season of the blazing sunflowers. You will handle the rest. Do it well, and this old man will reward you. But if you shirk your duties or mess up, heh. Master Kumu looked at He Pingxing, let out 2 cold chuckles, and waved his hand. Go on. Wang Dun will teach you how to tend to these blazing sunflowers and how to harvest their pollen. Now beat it. With that, before He Pingxing could even speak, the old man turned around and walked back into the cave. Chapter 29 Sunflower Pollen Junior Brother He, please come with me. Wang Dun led He Pingxing out of the cave where the withered wood immortal lived. After walking for about half an incense stick's time, the two arrived once again at the place where the fiery red sunflowers were located. Let me explain it to you briefly. Wang Dun looked at He Pingxing, then pointed to the sea of flowers beside them. This blazing sunflower is a 2nd-grade spiritual plant. In the cultivation world, spiritual plants, also known as immortal herbs, are graded. They are divided into 1st rank, 2nd rank, and so on up to 9th rank. Similarly, elixirs are also graded. A 1st-grade spiritual plant can only be used to refine 1st-grade pills, while a 2nd-grade spiritual plant can be used to refine 2nd-grade pills. And so on. These two are 2nd-grade spiritual plants, of the fire attribute. They originally grew in places where earth fire was exposed, and they needed to absorb the power of the fire attribute to grow. Of course, this is not absolute. Artificially cultivated fiery sunflowers can also be supplied with fire attribute spiritual energy through array formations, even without the earth's fire being exposed. The condition is that it needs a stable source of fire attribute. Fire spirit stones are acceptable, but the spiritual energy within them is unrefined and quite impure. While they can be used to power this formation and the blazing sunflower, they can easily cause a large-scale death of the blazing sunflower. The survival rate is very low. Besides fire spirit stones, it is nourished by the cultivator's own fire spirit power. The fire elemental energy refined by cultivators is pure and stable, and can continuously supply the blazing sunflower with fire attribute elemental energy. That's why it's so important to find a cultivator who specializes in fire elemental roots. See this stone. Wang Dun pointed to the stone where he had just tested the concentration of He Pingxing's fire elemental power and said, "This is the energy center of the entire formation. I'll tell you again, this stone has 4 colors: crimson, yellow, gold, and purple. Go back and send all your spiritual power into it. If it's crimson, then this spiritual energy can only last for 1 day, and you'll have to supply it continuously every day. If it's yellow, you can leave it alone for 3 days, and the power within will last for 3 days. If you are golden, then 1 treatment can last for 7 days. Do you understand?" Wang Dun's voice was a little loud. He Pingxing nodded and repeated, "Understood. Red for 1 day, yellow for 3 days, and gold for 7 days. Not bad," Wang Dun said with a smile, seeing how cooperative He Pingxing was. "All right, now you can ask me anything you don't understand." He Pingxing asked, "How many days will the purple one last?" Wang Dun's face immediately darkened, and he said, "Forget about the purple one." It wasn't that Wang Dun was unwilling to say. It was simply that when the Master Kumu instructed him, he only mentioned gold, not purple. "Oh." He Pingxing nodded. Wang Dun continued, "Besides supplying the fire elemental power to this formation, your job also includes collecting the pollen of the blazing sunflower." He Pingxing was stunned. "Pollen? I'm not a little bee." "That's right, it's pollen," Wang Dun said confidently. "Of course, the pollen won't fall off on its own, and you don't need to collect it every day. You just need to collect it every 3 to 5 days. Junior brother He, you don't understand. The most useful part of the entire blazing sunflower is its pollen. After collecting the pollen of the blazing sunflower, it is ground into powder and then mixed with beast blood to make talisman ink." Daomo. He Pingxing heard a new term. What is that? He felt he had talked a lot today. "But if I don't ask, I'll feel resentful." Wang Dun was quite friendly, and answered all of He Pingxing's questions. The so-called talisman ink is something used by cultivators who draw talismans. The pollen of the blazing sunflower is one of the main materials for drawing the 2nd-grade talisman, the blazing fire talisman, and is extremely expensive. Of course, pollen is also divided into 4 grades: low grade, medium grade, high grade, and top grade. They can be easily distinguished by color. Their corresponding colors are almost the same as those of the stone, namely red, yellow, gold, and purple. Come on, take a look this way. Not far from this patch of blazing sunflowers is a cliff, on which someone has carved out a round hole. Wang Dun pointed to the cave entrance and said, "To prevent fires and floods in the spirit herb garden, the construction of palaces and houses is not allowed. Everyone, including the drywood immortal, lives in the cave. Don't worry, the cave is spacious and there's a fire attribute spirit stone inside, which will ensure it stays dry all year round. This used to be where the last disciple who looked after the blazing sunflower lived. Now it belongs to you. Come with me." He Pingxing followed Wang Dun into the cave. It is indeed very large inside. There are 3 houses connected by light, and each house has a stone door. It was peaceful and comfortable. On the stone wall above the center of the hall, there is a red spirit stone the size of a jujube, which keeps flashing with a faint light. Waves of hot air swept down from above. Just as Wang Dun had said, the cave was dry and quite comfortable to live in. These are tools for collecting pollen. Wang Dun pointed to the jade bottle on the shelf in the room. This jade bottle looks similar to the jade bottles used to hold elixirs. Under normal circumstances, Wang Dun said, we can collect 10 bottles per month. After collecting the pollen, it needs to be ground here, ground into powder. All the pollen you obtain must be handed over to Master Kumu. You must not keep any for yourself. Otherwise, if you are discovered, you will be severely beaten. All right, that's all. Wang Dun said, You'll have to figure out your own meals, but if you're short of rice, I have plenty. I can even give you 30 catties of spirit rice every month. You'd better watch yourself." After saying this, Wang Dun left immediately. He Pingxing did not start working right away. Instead, he first familiarized himself with the environment. This place was roughly at the innermost part of the entire valley, quite far from where Wang Dun was located. It wasn't too far from Master Kumu, but even at a leisurely walking pace, it would still take about half an incense stick's time to get there. It was reasonably quiet and free from disturbances. After familiarizing himself with his surroundings, he Pingxing finally approached the spiritual field of blazing sunflowers. Reaching out a hand, he pressed it against the stone. Rumble. The fire attribute spiritual energy within He Pingxing's body surged forth like a torrential flood, flowing rapidly into the stone. Atop the stone, brilliant light radiated outward. It first displayed a crimson red, followed by a yellow. By the time He Pingxing had channeled about 80% of the spiritual power in his body into it, the stone finally displayed a golden color. Phew! He Pingxing took a deep breath and withdrew his mana. This was enough. To think it would actually be gold. Of course, he didn't know if he had the capability to make the stone display purple, but even if he did, He Pingxing had no intention of trying. After all, exposing his full strength brought him no benefits whatsoever. Chapter 30. Be flexible in your conduct during the test. The stone was also gold, but it only flashed briefly. Now, thanks to He Pingxing's magical power, the stone no longer just flashes once, but remains golden. After the energy supply was secured, He Pingxing observed the area for a while before returning inside to learn some techniques for collecting and grinding pollen. It's not easy. Of course, it's not that difficult. Because a single infusion of spiritual energy can last for 7 days, He Pingxing had enough time to cultivate. He found a quiet time when no one was around, and then took out a top-grade qi gathering pill. The aroma quickly spread. But it's not a big problem. First, although the aroma is strong, there are very few people in the valley, and they are far away. It's difficult to smell the fragrance of this top-grade elixir from 20 feet away. Secondly, this place was originally a place for cultivating spiritual plants, with various spiritual herbs and flowers blooming in competition, and the valley was originally filled with the fragrance of various herbs. After being masked by this layer of fragrance, the scent of the top-grade pill in He Pingxing's hand was reduced by half. He picked up the small, dark axe and divided the pill into 4 parts. He Pingxing had calculated that pollen needed to be collected approximately every 3 days. Therefore, I have to interrupt my practice every 3 days. That's exactly a quarter of a pill, enough for 3 days of cultivation. Having finished everything, He Pingxing put away the remaining 3 pill fragments, took out only one of them, put it in his mouth, and began cultivating. As his cultivation level improved, he was able to refine the pills at an increasingly faster pace. Previously, it would have taken him more than 10 days to fully digest this quarter of a pill, but now he can finish refining it in less than 3 days. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 3 days later, He Pingxing completely digested the energy in the pill. Then, he picked up the bottle and tools and went to the spirit field of the blazing sunflower. It's time to collect pollen. He Pingxing brought his tools to the scorching sunflower field and saw that the color of the stones had changed. It changed from gold to yellow. In other words, the fire elemental energy here is enough for the blazing sunflower to use for 3 or 4 days. There aren't many sunflowers in this spiritual field, only 300. He Pingxing spent about an hour collecting the pollen, obtaining more than 1 bottle of it. These pollen grains are all red. Clearly, this thing is just a low-grade product. Collecting pollen is not the end of the job, it also needs to be ground. Next, the pollen needs to be ground into a finer powder, since it will be mixed with talisman ink to ensure a smooth writing experience. After grinding, it was placed in a jade bottle and sealed. He Pingxing originally wanted to try using his own basin to see if he could strengthen it, but he gave up in the end. Because the risk of exposure is quite high. They collected pollen every 3 days, and after collecting it about 10 times, they delivered 10 bottles of ground pollen to the cave entrance of the Deadwood Immortal. He Pingxing worked carefully and made no mistakes. It was average. neither particularly good nor bad. 2 months have passed in the blink of an eye. He also used up the last 2 top-grade qi gathering pills he had left. His cultivation resources were completely cut off, and of course, he was still far from reaching the 5th level of qi refining. On this day, the withered tree master came out of his cave and summoned He Pingxing and Wang Dun to his presence. He Pingxing has done a good job these past 2 months. Master Kumu looked at He Pingxing and gave him an approving evaluation. Then he reached out and took out 2 spirit stones, tossing them to He Pingxing from a distance. "This is my reward to you." He Pingxing was overjoyed. "Thank you so much, Senior." Wang Dun, standing nearby, looked on with envy. Kumu nodded again and said, "If you think about it carefully, the blazing sunflower's blooming period is still 1 month away, but I have some business to attend to and need to leave the sect for a while. During this time, you need to take good care of the blazing sunflower for me. The flowers will wither in a month, but you don't need to do anything about them." "Yes." He Pingxing cupped his hands in greeting. The withered tree continued, "However, this thing is not easy to preserve. Over time, its fire attribute will be lost. If too much fire spiritual power is lost, this thing will no longer be able to draw fire talismans. But I don't know when I'll be back." "All right. Wang Dun, when the time comes, you take He Pingxing to Matu Mountain and bring the pollen you collected in the last month to the market. Find a shop called Fenghe Manor, and give it to Manager Shi." "Yes." Wang Dun and He Pingxing bowed. Kumu then took out another paper crane and gave it to Wang Dun. Next, the withered tree left the Valley of Spirit Medicine. In the vast valley, only He Pingxing and Wang Dun remained. Next, He Pingxing continued working as always. Output spiritual energy, collect pollen, and grind the pollen. During this time, Wang Dun would come to keep an eye on He Pingxing from time to time, as if he was afraid that He Pingxing would steal something. He Pingxing found it amusing. Just as the withered wood immortal had said, all 300+ blazing sunflowers withered overnight after their last month. He Pingxing collected a little over 11 bottles of pollen in the last month of his life. He worked for 3 months. In the first month, I received a little over 10 bottles of pollen. The second month also saw a little over 10 bottles. But for some reason this month, I suddenly got an extra bottle, bringing the total to over 11. My dear reader, there's more to, even more exciting content awaits. This inevitably led him to have wild fantasies. After all, there is no precise standard for how much pollen to collect each day during the flowering season. There is only a general range. More or less, nobody knows. Should we embezzle a little? He Pingxing can guarantee that even if there is some embezzlement, neither Kumu Zhanren nor Wang Dun will be able to find out. Call. Faced with these 11 bottles of pollen, He Pingxing did not hesitate for long. He took one of the bottles and poured it into his own jade bottle. "I'm sorry, Senior Kumu. This junior truly lacks cultivation resources. I'll lend you a bottle of pollen today. When the opportunity arises in the future, I will certainly repay the debt of gratitude I owe you for today. You have to be more flexible in life. You can't be such a blockhead, can you?" While preoccupied with his thoughts, He Pingxing calmly took a bottle of pollen, packed up all the remaining pollen, and then went to find Wang Dun. "Senior brother Wang," He Pingxing said, "the blazing sunflowers have all withered, and the remaining pollen has been collected and ground into powder. They're all here, please take a look." Wang Dun opened the cloth bag that He Pingxing had sent, looked at the 11 bottles, and said, "Junior brother He, didn't you think of keeping some for yourself?" He Pingxing immediately became serious and said, "Senior Kumu has been good to me, I would never do such a thing." Hehehe. Wang Dun chuckled and said, "In this way, we can hide half a bottle, and even Senior Kumu might not know. When the time comes, we can tell him 2 days in advance the date of the flowers withering, and who would know? How about we split the spirit stones from selling this half bottle of pollen 50-50? Thank you for listening to Panda Audiobooks. If you love what you hear and want to support my work, check out the PayPal link in the description. Every bit helps. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. and hit that notifications bell to stay updated with all our latest audiobook chapters. We'll see you in the next one.